Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and deceased. It is I am Mighty Sophia, here to break down for you guys the second episode of the latest season of The Walking Dead. We are on JSS. So, spoiler alert, before we dive into the mad thick of things, as I shall be bearing all in this review, and without further ado, let's do that thing we always do and talk about the madness and the business of the show. So, I was incredibly pleased with this episode, and it may very well have worked its way onto my list of favorite episodes for this show in its entirety. I mean, I can't tell you if that's like a top 10 or top 20 or top 5, but nonetheless, JSS hit close to home. Home being the now compromised Alexandria, which has a freaking horde of zombies headed its way. In addition to the murderous wolves who left their bloody mark on this community. And it was an incredibly tight and well-paced, just all-out thrilling episode that had me hooked from the get-go to the conclusion. So, not every episode of The Walking Dead grabs you that way. But I'm really feeling it, and as it just so happens, I am wearing a, I don't know if you can see this, I got my wolf shirt thing on, so I guess I was ready for tonight. We get to see in this episode the events leading up to the blaring horn that interrupts Rick and company's plan as they're attempting to lead these thousands upon thousands of walkers elsewhere in the world. And now, looks like things are going to take a slight bit of a left turn, and little do they realize exactly the kind of violence that this siren signals. And what I had initially thought was that, well, I knew that the wolves had to be involved with it somehow, but I thought that maybe perhaps they were actually using that sound as a weapon to draw in a little extra craziness, back them up. But as it turns out, it was more of just a symptom of their onslaught and ambush on Alexandria. But what was cool about this episode is that we have some of our key players, they're still out in the woods. People like Rick and Michonne and Carl and Sasha and Abraham, they're all elsewhere. So we get to see the rest of the team shine in such an incredible way, namely Carol and Morgan. Carol, baby, I have called Rick Grimes the Grime Reaper because he has certainly become a fearless and ruthless killer as time has gone on, or well, killer. Of course, it really depends on your perspective with things. I think that in this world it is completely possible to be fully a killer as needed and fully human. Whatever connotations there are, that's all the philosophical existential stuff. But yeah, so it was really crazy to get to see. Of course, Carol delivered on every possible level, and we got to see some interesting stuff from Morgan too, who is every bit as badass as Carol. Although I would argue that Carol's transformation, I find perhaps the most impressive, just really getting to see her and walk alongside her throughout the show's entirety and see how she's changed. But yeah, so it's really crazy to see how the two of them tackle this situation in totally different ways. We've got on one side of the spectrum Carol's ruthless efficiency, and on the other side of the spectrum we have Morgan's his inclination for mercy. So even though he definitely has the skills to protect himself, to protect others, and to get the job done, he really prefers to find a way to prevent the loss of life. Don't know how that's going to serve him in the long run, but at least the way that he goes about it isn't entirely stupid. He at least has the skills to bring himself back from a situation where, whoops, he kept somebody alive who actually came back to bite him in the butt. So, that hasn't killed him yet. It still could, but nonetheless, I see the reason for his methods, And then I also see the method to Carol's madness. At any rate, I'm going to touch briefly on some of the other characters before getting back into those two because we have much to discuss in that department. But, so we get to see a new character, Denise, who is now officially the resident doctor and surgeon of the area. And originally, she was a psychiatrist. So, you know, taking care of the bloody bodies is not exactly in her wheelhouse, even though she was on track to be a surgeon once upon a time. But then, of course, cue the panic attacks. She's not exactly, or in another world, felt that she was not exactly cut out for the line of work she was pursuing. And now, hey, as fate would have it, she has been plopped back into this track and now is forced to deal with these incredibly stressful situations. And alongside her, she has Tara and Eugene, who I think are the perfect kind of characters, more main characters to have in her presence to make her plot a little bit more interesting. And ultimately, I think it's very fitting that she was unable to save her patient. And this is the way of the world. It's time to step up and to be able to face the anxiety of loss, to know how to handle it and to move on and to at least try, which I think is it's a super great message coming from Tara and Eugene, especially, who knows cowardice like nobody's business. So he is able to speak from experience. Hey, this is your chance to actually step up, you know, do something good for humanity, even if it doesn't pan out. And hey, you know, everybody else is getting slaughtered outside, so comparatively, you're really doing okay. Meanwhile, Deanna's really in kind of a messed up place. She was quite a powerhouse in the previous season, but we see that after the death of Red, she's really gotten the wind knocked out of her system. And so we even now have Maggie trying to instill a sense of leadership within her. I don't mean to say Maggie like, oh, Maggie of all people. I'm just saying that it's surprising that somebody as strong-jawed as Deanna has really kind of crumpled up the way that she has and is now pretty much gone into hiding in the midst of the wolves' attack. But I guess it makes sense. She's still incredibly traumatized, but then again, so is Jesse. Jesse goes a different route, shall we say. But yeah, and I do have to touch on things, of course, with Ron, Jesse's son, and Enid and Carl. As far as their little plot goes, it's nothing huge. We see some disturbing behavior on Ron's part as he is kind of lashing out at his mother after the death of his abusive father. Leads me to believe that he could potentially replicate some of his father's behaviors, which, oh man, I'm really hoping it's not the case. But nonetheless, he's still in the picture. Now, Enid comes and goes, but we do get to see a bit of her life before she even came to Alexandria. And then we see that she chooses to return to her life of wandering or whatever else it may be. Although I do find her exit at the end of this episode a little bit suspect. I know that some people have guessed that she might actually be a spy for the wolves or involved with the wolves in some fashion. Carl does end up getting to kill one of the wolves, you know, supposedly. There were some weird shots in the episode where it's like you can't quite tell if somebody actually went through with killing someone else, and, you know, just to kind of break up the action, to keep you guessing so it's not just like an non-stop murder fest per se. But yeah, a little bit of connection between Carl and Enid, and then ultimately she leaves him, not with a goodbye, not with a hello, but with JSS, or Just Survives Somehow, which is what she was drawing in the dirt everywhere she went after the brutal death of her parents, and, you know, finding herself locked up in their car, watching them getting eaten, and then she goes on to survive as she does, whether it's cowering and, you know, just in this forest filled with the hissing of the undead, or cracking open a little turtle and getting the turtle bones out to play a little Scrabble in the dirt. Messed up times for everybody. But yeah, so it was an interesting beginning. Certainly led to a very different kind of episode, and I have a suspicion that Enid might not be fully out of the picture yet. But anyhow, also we do get to see that Father Gabriel is still He's trying to come back from what he did in the previous season, and a lot of people aren't really having that yet because he really kind of screwed the pooch. But now has realized that the problem was not with the group, but with his own perception of the world and his inability to change and to shift. And maybe now he's kind of finding his footing. But, you know, the question is he really going to be given the chance to prove himself after proving himself, well, such a capable traitor, of course. I don't know. Carl's like, well, maybe. Morgan actually ends up rescuing him. Now, hats off to freaking Jessie. She goes ham in this episode. I am proud of that mother bear, because even though we see that the way that she makes a quick work of that lady wolf in the house, you know, there's a she wolf in the closet, and Jessie came right on out to put an end to that with some scissors. And yeah, I mean, it was really cathartic to see her kind of like breaking out of all the pain and all the trauma that she experienced from her husband's death, and now kind of coming into her own and realizing the brutality of this world and fighting back against it, even though it's, you know, it's a little bit freaky to see her going so crazy and in front of her son, no less. But fact of the matter is, this was definitely coming, and I'm glad that she was able to have this experience. I don't know. It at least proves that Jessie is a capable fighter. And, you know, she and Rick could make a good team down the line. There's a lot that's messed up in their relationship, but nonetheless, she has learned from him. Hopefully he will learn from her, and they will have a good partnership over time, perhaps. So now this brings me to the entrance of the wolves, which I think was handled in such a fabulous way. I think that they just did an incredible job of just the sheer shock value of their arrival, because I weary of the jump scare zombies. Like, we shouldn't be at a point in the game where people can be surprised by walkers. I really don't feel 9 times out of 10 shouldn't really be the case. They make so much noise and they respond to any kind of external stimuli. Come on, y'all. But anyways, so when Carol's looking out the window at Mrs. Hummerschnitzen smoking her cigarette, and then all of a sudden this guy just lunges and destroys her, like, I genuinely gasped. And it was just, I mean, there were no brakes hit in this episode. From there, it was full throttle insanity, and I dug it. I dug it indeed. It was truly breathtaking. The action was great. And then, of course, getting to see, you know, Carol in wolf's clothing, systematically taking them out one by one, whereas Morgan often actually tried to at least take prisoners, to tie some guys up and to, you know, to stall them with his crazy stick action, and then, you know, at least attempt to resolve the situation. Carol actually, on a couple of occasions, straight up shot his people. So she was not gonna ask any questions, and I could definitely sympathize with Carol, because it's like, at this point, what exactly do you gain from trying to get information from these people who clearly are just out to destroy and decimate? And the threat is so intense and so ghastly that Carol's immediate reaction is to kick into high gear and to blend in, to go Mystique on this business, and to take them all out with the skills that she has proven so gloriously throughout the show. And then, of course, whereas Morgan is extremely skilled and knows what he's doing, but is trying to figure out, you know, how can I preserve life? How do I waylay the inevitable and make sure that there is some spirit of humanity in all of this? And then ultimately, Carol and Morgan end up passing one another by. And I think that there is an understanding between them that despite the different worlds that they come from, the different ways that they go about things, well, this is what they're into now. And things are only going to escalate from here, I'm afraid. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching my review. Oh, good God, Carol, I love you, I love you, I love you. Leave no survivors, baby. She is the business. I'm excited to see the team reunite in the week to come. leave all your thoughts below, and I will do my best to join you in the comments too. So y'all take care, and as always, I'll be back before you know it.